Week 14 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 20 quarterbacks I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. Another great season for Allen. MVP candidate once again. And he was the number 1 quarterback off the board for a reason. So even with a limited wide receiving core for the majority of the season, this week in a matchup, a potential high-scoring ball game at the Rams, I think once again Allen goes out there, has a good ball game. And last week in the snow, he still put up over 30 fantasy points. So this week on the fast track indoors at the Rams, I think Allen has another big game. Number 2, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Jalen Hurts, it's been a great season for him in the Philadelphia Eagles. And this week, a great matchup versus the Carolina Panthers that can't stop anyone. So Jalen Hurts, MVP type of season for him as well. This team is rolling now on the season, one of the best teams in all pro football. And this week versus the Panthers, I don't think they have an answer for Hurts. And this could be one of his better games of the season. Number 3, Joe Burrow, the Cincinnati Bengals. So this week, a great matchup at the Dallas Cowboys that can't stop anyone. And Joe Burrow, I know it's been a tough year for the Bengal team overall, 4-8 on the year, but they're putting up 35 points per game. Him and Jamar Chase have been locked in all season. And in the ball games T. Higgins has played this year, he's gone out there and put up fantasy points. So this week at the Cowboys, I think it's another big week for the Cincinnati offense. And Joe Burrow has been putting up big points weekly. Number 4, Tua of the Miami Dolphins. So Tua, we know he's a way better quarterback at home than he's been on the road in his NFL career. And this week, a good matchup versus the New York Jets, a defense that can't stop anyone. Him and Tyreek Hill are locked in, and Jonnu Smith over the last month of the season's really been locked in and emerged as the number 2 option in the passing game for this Miami Dolphin team. So Tua is making quick decisions. He's throwing an accurate ball. And this week versus the New York Jets, like I said, they can't stop anyone, even though coming into the year, they were ranked one of the better defenses in the league. Number 5, Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Patrick Mahomes, it hasn't been a great season, but this week I think he could exploit this Los Angeles Chargers team on Sunday Night Football, where their defense has been leaky at times. I know last week they went out there, had a good ball game versus Kirk Cousins, who threw 4 interceptions in that one. But Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs team, they know they got to try to lock up this home field advantage. And this is a big division game, even though I know the Chargers are not really in striking distance of this Chiefs team. But Patrick Mahomes, like I said, he's got a good track record versus Charger defense. He's been playing better football over the last few weeks here. They're healthy as they can be, with even Hollywood Brown possibly returning in Week 16. So I think Mahomes this week has one of his better games of the year. Number 6, Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. See, he's banged up a little bit as Baker Mayfield. He left the game for a little bit at the Panthers in Week 12, but he gutted it out, finished the game, and they won in overtime with Tampa Bay. So this week, a great matchup versus the Vegas Raiders. Their defense can't stop anyone. And now with Mike Evans back in the lineup, that's a huge boost, obviously. One of the best receivers in the league to get back in your lineup, to go with 2 good running backs in Rashad White and Bucky Irvin. So this week with a good matchup, and him and Mike Evans picking up where they left off since he returned. I like the results we could see from Baker this week. Number 7, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. So it's going to be a high-scoring game, I believe, Thursday night, and an indoor game, obviously, as well with Detroit. I know this line defense, they've been good, but also at times they've given up their share fair points. We saw it a few weeks ago with the Houston Texans, and we even saw it last week. The Bears rallied their way back, and then bad clock management did them in from at least not trying to force that game to overtime. So this week at Detroit, I think Jordan Love could go out there. He's going to turn the football over a little bit, but also I believe we could see a decent amount of yards and putting points on the board in a high-scoring game. Number 8, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions staying in the same game. So Goff, some weeks, he has those 15, 18-point fantasy days, and then going back weeks ago where he had the 412 pass yards and 2 touchdowns. He could go off at any time. So this week, like I said, a lot of points are going to be put on the board in Detroit, especially here Thursday Night Football, always high-scoring games. And Goff, when you got weapons like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, who found the end zone twice last week as well, it just makes everything easier as long as you're accurate and get the football to those players. And all season long, his completion rate has been amazing as Jared Goff. Number 9, Sam Darnold of the Minnesota Vikings. So Sam Darnold, what a surprising season it's been for him with this Minnesota Viking team. They're going to make the playoffs unless they really collapse in the next latter part of the season here. So this week, good matchup with the Atlanta Falcons coming to town. Their defense has definitely had flaws this season, and if Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson could get back to the elite level they were playing at early in the season, I think the numbers go up even more, because the last few weeks with Jefferson, besides last week not doing much, he's scoring in that 18-20 point fantasy range. So Jefferson 99 yards last week. TJ Hawkinson, he's had a couple good games, a couple bad games since he returned, and Jordan Addison at least is getting more steady as well, his numbers. So this week versus Atlanta, I think Darnold goes out there once again, has a good ball game. Number 10, Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers. So this is pretty much their season here. If they lose and go to 5-8 versus the Bears, this 49er team is done, but I think they're going to throw the football a little bit more. Christian McCaffrey hurt again. He's on IR, out for the season. Jordan Mason, who was great filling in for McCaffrey the first 2 months of the season, he's out on IR as well with an ankle injury. Now they're down to Isaac Arenda, who definitely has some upside, but he's a rookie and a fourth rounder, so I don't know if he's going to get these 20-25 touches per game. So this week versus the Bears, a defense that's had trouble, especially the last month of the season, stopping anyone. I think Brock Purdy could go out there, and last week at least he was unscathed in that snowball game and came out healthy. And obviously they went to the bench in the second half after they were getting blown out. So Brock Purdy this week versus the Bears, I think, is a good option. Number 11, Jameis Winston of the Cleveland Browns. Jameis Winston, this guy's the ultimate gunslinger. You're going to take the good and get the bad as well. And it was a tale of two tapes in last week's ball game of one of the best defenses in the league at the Broncos. He went for 497 pass yards. He had 4 touchdowns, 2-point conversion, and then 3 interceptions, including 2 pick sixes, and almost 3 of them where a shoestring tackle stopped that pick six. So Jameis Winston, like I said, he's the ultimate gunslinger in the NFL. He's got a big cannon arm. Him and Jerry Jeudy definitely locked in, where Jeudy went for 235 on 13 catches and found the end. David Njoku had 2 touchdowns in that game. So Winston, he's going to air that football out. So a couple weeks ago versus Steelers team in the snow, he went out there and he had a decent ball game, especially considering the weather conditions. So this week, I'm not saying Jameis goes out there and even goes for 300 yards, but I think something in the 250 range with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions definitely is a possibility. Number 12, Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. So the last couple weeks, Williams has definitely moved up the ranks once again after he had a bad month stretch where he couldn't do anything for this Bear team of fantasy owners. But now with Matt Eberflus out as head coach, I think things are going to open up for the Chicago Bear team, and this offense is going to get off to better starts, because there's a lot of games, especially the last few weeks, they're trailing early and often, and they have to play catch-up and become one-dimensional. So this week at San Francisco, a defense that's had a lot of flaws and blown a lot of games towards the end of ball games this season. I think Caleb Williams could go out there. If they could get off to a good start, he could put up even a better ball game, I believe. And Keenan Allen the last few weeks has definitely come around, and DJ Moore's back to putting up good numbers. So this offense starting to round into shape, and now with a head coaching change, I believe they could play better and obviously more inspired. Number 13, Russell Wilson, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Russell Wilson, I thought they should have stuck with Justin Fields, but Wilson's definitely proved me wrong. He has something left in the tank. So this week in the matchup versus the Browns, where their defense can't stop anyone, and Russell Wilson last week went off 400 yards, 3 touchdowns in that ball game. I'm not saying he's going to put up those numbers, but definitely a quarterback that could put up decent numbers in this ball game. George Pickens, he's been great since Wilson's been in the lineup. Pat Freiermuth, he's been making plays, finding the end zone. And this week versus the Cleveland Browns, I think Russell Wilson could have that decent 18-20 point fantasy day. 14, Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. So it's been a weird season for Murray. Some big games for him, and then those games where he's only scoring 8 or 9 fantasy points. Even his rushing attempts and stuff have gone down some ball games. So this week, a tough matchup versus Seattle that shut this offense down a few weeks ago, winning 16-6, including a pick six. Kyler Murray threw in that ball game. But Murray, we know he's been a better quarterback at home than he's been on the road. So this week, I don't have a high ceiling for Murray, but I definitely think he does better than he did in that Week 12 ball game versus Seattle defense. 15, Kirk Cousins of the Atlanta Falcons. Cousins versus his former team in the Minnesota Vikings, and he wants to stick it to them. And any time a player versus his former team, they got a little extra adrenaline, they got a little more motivation. And we saw it last week with Jerry Jeudy versus former team that didn't want to pay him and traded him away to Cleveland, going for 235 and a touchdown. So Kirk Cousins, I believe he's due for a big game. Last week, it was just a horrible game, obviously, for him. 4 interceptions in that one versus the Chargers. But this week, Kirk Cousins, week back in Minnesota for Kirk Cousins, it wouldn't surprise me if he goes out there and has a big ball game. Number 16, Geno Smith of the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith, he's in the high-powered offense. Two great wide receivers, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and the Jiggler. Good running back in Kenneth Walker. So this offense, they definitely got good pieces, and Geno Smith could run the football a little bit as well. So this week at Arizona, I'm not setting the bar real high for Geno Smith, but I definitely think he could be a serviceable quarterback. And like I said, when you got two wide receivers like that they got great yard after catch ability and could score anywhere on the field almost. It's tough not to have Geno at least in the top 20. 17, Aaron Rodgers of the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers, it hasn't been a good season for him. He's definitely taken a step back after tearing the Achilles last season, taking big hits, and this Jet offensive line just isn't that good as well. I know they got good weapons, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Breece Hall, but all season long it just seems like the timing's been off, and big plays really haven't been there for this New York Jet team. So Rodgers this week, decent matchup in Miami, where their defense has had trouble stopping people this year. But Aaron Rodgers, it seems like the turnovers every week have been a problem as well, where his interception rate's definitely way up from where it was even 2 years ago for Aaron Rodgers. So this week in Miami, I think he's a borderline option. He's still putting up 18, 20-point fantasy range. And like I said, this could be a potential high-scoring game between these two teams this week. 18, Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams. So this week, not a great matchup versus the Buffalo Bills. Last week, he salvaged in the second half of that game is Matthew Stafford, where he had under 100 yards passing in the first half. But when you got guys like Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, the numbers are going to come many times. But like I said, Stafford last week didn't look great. Now, I'm not 100% nursing an ankle injury that he sustained in the first half of that ball game at the New Orleans Saints. But I think Stafford's going to play, but I just don't know how effective he's going to play, because this Bill defense, they've been shutting down offenses for the most part over the last few weeks. 19, Derek Carr of the New Orleans Saints. And Derek Carr, he's got a decent matchup, obviously, at the New York Giants. We know this receiving core is depleted. Chris Olave still out. Rashid Shaheed, he's out for the season, and he's been out over 2 months now, almost, as Shaheed. But this week at the Giants, a secondary that can't stop anyone. Valdez-Scantlin's been a great deep ball threat in this offense. I know Taysom Hill, they've lost for the season as well with the torn ACL, but I still believe Derek Carr, in a week with 6 teams on bye, could go out there and be a serviceable option. In the 20th and final quarterback on rankings, Will Levis of the Tennessee Titans. So Will Levis, he's definitely improved, believe it or not, over the last month of the season since DeAndre Hopkins got traded away. So Calvin Ridley has been more involved in the offense, and rightfully so after getting a monster contract in the offseason. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, one of the best deep ball threats, and he's pretty much been a walking touchdown, 8 touchdowns and 18 catches on the season. And this week with a great matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars that can't stop anyone. If you're in desperation for a deep sleeper, I think Will Levis could once again put up some decent points. But this week, I don't think this is as high as these other players. That's the top 20 quarterbacks I'm ranking for Week 14 of the fantasy football season.